How's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is a conversation with Rantz Hoseley, and he is the winner of an Eisner Award, a Harvey Award. He's a screenwriter, an art director, and illustrator. He's a senior editor at Z2 Comics. He has stories about serial killers, Walt Disney, music, art, writing, adventure. Tori Amos, who's a friend of his. And in fact, Tori Amos just announced a couple weeks ago that she's releasing her new album, Christmas Tide. It's her holiday-themed EP, and Rantz painted the gatefold wraparound cover for that. They've known each other for many, many years, and he tells a fun story about her. I don't want to give too much away. We get right into it, and it's a fun conversation. In other news, let's talk about social media. Hey Human Podcast is on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find my personal social media under Susan Ruthism, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Susan at heyhumanpodcast.com if you want to email me. There is a links page on heyhumanpodcast.com where you will find information about every episode that has aired and that will ever air. You can rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, for Christmas, this is what I would like, for you to go and rate and review Hey Human. It would mean a lot, and it's really super duper helpful. And I appreciate it if you take the time to do that. SusanRuth.com is where you can find more information about me. You can join the mailing list there. I send out mailers about every quarter, so I will not deluge your inbox with emails. If you want to check out my music, go to iTunes and look up Susan Ruth, and I am there. If you're feeling like a jolly old elf and you would like to donate to Hey Human Podcast, you can do so right there on the front page of the website, heyhumanpodcast.com. There is now Hey Human merchandise. Very exciting. It is on there, the storefront. It's safe and secure, and you can get all sorts of items, clothes, and artwork, and pencil cases, and hats, and masks, and all that kind of stuff. So definitely check out the merch for Hey Human. It really helps support the podcast. And again, I appreciate that. I think that's it for the ins and outs. A couple shows that I recently watched. I know everyone's talking about it, but The Queen's Gambit was excellent. I really loved it. I grew up in a family that played chess, so I guess it was extra for me. But wow, what a beautifully shot show. I loved her outfits. And then I just watched a show called Maniac on Netflix. It has Jonah Hill and Emma Stone and a cast of crazy characters. What a ride that show was, and I loved it. It is trippy, though. Holy moly. So that's my recommendations for this week. That's about it. Okay, let's get into this. Thank you for listening. Be smart, stay healthy, eat your vitamins, chew on some greens, do all the things. Here we go. Rantz Hoseley, welcome to Hey Human.
Hello.
How are you? Thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
It looks like we're both surrounded by the books.
Yes, of course. It is. I've had it as my one thing of clinging to possessions and objects is books, graphic novels, art folios, all of those kinds of things. Yeah. It's the childhood obsession with having a library when you grow up and become an adult. So getting to actually, once you actually start collecting books, it's all over from there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of books, and I geek out on the Ranker and BuzzFeed. They show top 20 libraries in the world, and it's these massive shelves of books with the long ladders that go all the way around the room. I just obsess over that stuff. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get into you. You grew up in the Pacific Northwest?
I did. I grew up in a little town called Clarkston, Washington, which is right across the river from Lewiston, Idaho. So it's on the Washington-Idaho border. You cross a bridge, and for functional purposes, it feels all just like one town. But you cross the bridge, and you're in Idaho and Lewiston. So it's and it was a pivotal part on the Lewis-Clark Trail. So it is Lewiston and Clarkston as a result of that. Historically, probably the biggest moment of notoriety is that Walt Disney got married there. His wife, Lillian Bounds, was from Lapway, which was the Nez Perce Reservation, which is about 5 miles out, and her brother was the fire chief of Lewiston. So they got married in Lewiston, Idaho, and everyone in Idaho both constantly criticizes these damn Californians coming in and ruining their life, and simultaneously bragging nonstop about how Disney married his wife in Idaho. So
I think I've never considered Walt Disney as a married person. He feels asexual to me.
Well,
not that asexual people can't get married. I'm just saying that I've never thought of him in terms of that, a sexual being or whatever.
I worked for Disney for 3 years, and they give you the whole 2-day putting the mouse chip in your brain, the whole protocols of Mickey, and making sure that you are thoroughly indoctrinated into the ways. And one of the things they give you is Walt's. They give you a goodie bag, quote unquote, full of Disney propaganda, including Walt's biography. And I have a lot of respect for him as a human being, and as an artist, and as a visionary. It's one of those first examples for me of running up against the reality of someone can be incredibly smart, incredibly creative, have great, brilliant ideas that truly add layers to humanity, the human experience, et cetera, and still have bad traits. And that's true for all of us. None of us are all good or all bad, or so you have to kind of look at the balance of it. And I think on the balance, I think that Disney, Walt, and his brother Roy were very good people who actually pushed both Hollywood and the creative endeavors in a number of ways. Whether you're talking television, whether you're talking animation, whether you're talking distribution of film in a non-monopolistic way, ironically. My favorite story in the Disney biography, which they give you, is that RKO held Snow White hostage for a sequel to Three Little Pigs, because when Three Little Pigs came out, it was a blockbuster. And here's this short animated film that is so popular that it was the first movie that had a hit song that actually was doing millions and millions of dollars in sales just on the song alone. The short was so popular that they were having screenings of just the short and charging full price for it. So RKO was like, you have to do a sequel to Three Little Pigs, and Walt was like, I'm not going to do a sequel. That's not the point of it. I'm doing Snow White. And they said, well, we're not going to distribute Snow White unless you do a sequel to Three Little Pigs. And he refused, and Roy told him, look, if you don't do this, we're going to lose the studio. We're going to lose all of this work that's been done. You're going to have to fire everyone. We are between a rock and a hard place. So Walt did a sequel to Three Little Pigs, and it bombed. And his response to that was to create a plaque that he put on his desk, and it is still on his desk on the main lot in the Walt Disney Studios, and it says, "You can't top pigs with pigs," meaning a sequel is never the answer to go. Ironically, a sequel is never the way to go. So
I love it. You can't top pigs with pigs. That's going to be in my brain forever. I love that. And tell that to George Orwell.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Unless some pigs are more equal than others.
Yeah, exactly. When you sent me your bio, of course, first thing that stood out is you said your father was a grifter on the run.
Well, so My dad never had a job for longer than a year. He was, in his words, a shuck and jive man. He was always looking for what could elevate him, make him money with both the least amount of effort possible, and while giving him notoriety, fame, whatever that is on a regional, local basis kind of thing. So he was always running cons. He was always running scams. And my father and I did not have a great relationship, as you can imagine. Aside from all that, he was just, I don't want to say he was a bad person, but he definitely had issues that he never confronted, and he never came to terms with. And everyone around him, kind of suffered the consequences of that. So at a certain point, I stopped even trying to talk with him, because it was always another excuse for why this con went wrong, or this grift went wrong, or no, he's really changed this time. And then I find out, after not hearing from him for 3 or 4 years, that he's in the Philippines, married to his that he went, first of all, to the Philippines under the pretext of finding my half sister, which he sired when he was in the Air Force, and that I don't think that he ever found her, but so he ended up getting married to a woman in her 20s while he was in his 70s, and he was unable to return to the States because both the FBI and the IRS had started investigating him for different fraud and scams and things that he was doing. And the reason I knew this was because the FBI showed up on my front doorstep one time, because I was born RENCE, and I changed my name when I was a junior in high school after my parents got divorced, because my dad was taking out credit cards and loans using my Social Security number.
Oh, shit.
So the FBI shows up thinking that, is this Rantz Hoseley Sr., and he's just changed the spelling to try and throw us off, or so that was fun.
Oh my God, how long did it take you to work your credit back out after that happened? Because I know that happens, that parents do that.
The first 15 years of life after high school was pretty difficult, because I would constantly get these things of there was this loan taken out in the amount of $8,000, and you were liable for it. And I'm like, that's not me. So I had always said, as a result, that if I ever had a son, that I would not name him after myself, just because I've seen what can go horribly wrong.
Is your father still alive?
No, he died 2014, 2015, in the Philippines, and his wife sent my sister and I pictures of the funeral, in which she took selfies with him in the coffin. And I was just like, that's 100% the only end that there could be to this story. It's,
Yeah. How does, when knowing that your relationship was strained with him for so long, and even going years without talking with him, when he dies, is there a release for you, or do you feel like that's unfinished business?
No, I mean, I was, my father was very violent. He was very both verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive. And so I was a very, very angry teenager. I was a very angry 20-something. And I had the best therapist I had when I was around 24, 25 told me that the anger that you have is the thing that has allowed you to survive and succeed. It allowed you to get away from the environment that you grew up in. It allowed you to distance yourself from all these things. But if you do not put it aside now, and if you don't learn to deal with things in a different way, it's going to kill you. And she was right. And it took, another 10 years for me to actually actualize that and understand that on a cellular level rather than just okay, whatever. But by the time my dad died, I had given him chance after chance after chance. I was no longer angry with him in an aggressive way. And I had become a father, so I understood how difficult it can be being a father. So I had more empathy for him from the standpoint of that he wasn't built for this. Yeah, he really. There are some people that just aren't built to be parents psychologically, emotionally, and also I knew a lot of the stuff that because of talking with my cousins, because of talking with his brothers, the stuff that his mother had done, the stuff that he had gone through. It didn't make any excuses for his behavior, but it put things in context. So by the time he died, it was really a non-existent thing. There wasn't any anger to resolve. There wasn't any feeling of things left unfinished. It was, and there honestly wasn't even any real feelings of sadness because it was just at that point, he was just a person. I didn't have any kind of, I didn't have any relationship to mourn, and I didn't have any desire to, of like what could have been. Like I came to terms a long time ago with the fact that like there would never have been. That's just the way he was built, and there we go. And I've had a couple of really close friends die within the last 5 years. People that I would consider my best friends, and unexpectedly, and with those, that's an emotional impact that I'll feel, and that has impacted me on a personal level and on how I perceive the world, much deeper than I experienced with my dad dying. My dad dying, the only emotional reaction was disbelief that his wife would send me selfies with him in the coffin. It was just like, what?
Very weird. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Absolutely.
It is interesting that we get to a point, I think, in our progress, if we're lucky, that we see our parents as separate. They came together literally and made a baby, but, well, maybe one of them did. We don't know.
We hope for their sake.
We hope for their sake. That we can see them as these separate beings. It is a weird... It's like Frankenstein, right? Frankenstein created a monster and then abandoned him. And I think many a parent abandons their child in some way or another. And partly because they had to push him out of the nest, but also partly because, as you said, they don't have the skills. Maybe they were never meant to be a parent at all, but society says you have to procreate, you have to do this thing to make you a viable human being, and to have your legacy and immortality and all of that. But I think it's such a relief to realize, oh, my parents are their own people, and it doesn't mean I don't have to. I don't have to be attached to them in the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot. The thing that I've kind of come to in the last 5 years from a creative standpoint in the work, in the writing that I'm doing and stuff, is that it's become very apparent to me that we move through life without really giving people productive examples in entertainment, in our narratives, our stories. of how that allow people to see themselves and to allow people to model themselves in a way that's more productive. So, we, for the most part, film has become, a haven of shit blows up real good, and genre exploitation kind of stuff. And the irony is, like, I say this as someone who grew up learning to draw from comic books, who loved comic books from the first moment he discovered them, and who growing up in elementary school, junior high school, wanted to draw comics more than anything. That was like because superheroes were the fucking shit, and I loved all this stuff. And if I never see another superhero film, that would be just completely perfectly fine, because I think that it has. I think that genre entertainment and the prevalence of it has encouraged a simplistic, reductive way of problem solving. That solutions are binary. That there is good. That there is simply good and evil in it. We don't talk about how difficult death is to deal with, and losing someone that you care about, and that it's not a thing that you really ever get over. We don't talk about how complex relationships are. We get meet cute stories where it's like, oh, that's adorable, and then and they'll have some kind of falling out in the second act. In the third act, there'll be some ridiculous moment, and it's all predictable and by the beats kind of thing. And then people, even you ask folks and they'll say that they're not influenced by this stuff. But the thing is that we're influenced by the stories that we
by everything,
right? And if those things aren't given as if we don't have examples of how people willingly work through conflicts, I think that for instance, *Halt and Catch Fire* TV series is phenomenal for many reasons, but one of the reasons I love it is because it really shows the difficulty of navigating relationships, even if you care about someone, even if you love someone, even if you're creatively meant to be with them as a partner, like that you work well together. That doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to work out, because these things are difficult, and there's no judgment in that. That is, all of us are just trying to get through this thing. So
safety is never guaranteed. Maybe that's why you were more drawn to the comics, is because many of this, in my opinion, and from what I've read of comic books, a lot of the superheroes come from these tragic beginnings, and they are in touch with their shadow side. They're vigilante, but it comes from a place of darkness a lot of times. They're trying to help the underdog, because they themselves are the underdog. They may not even touch that in themselves, but that's what propels them forward.
Well, I think that absolutely is part of it. That, especially as a kid, like you, to be clear, I don't think that this is the case anymore. I'm speaking from a consuming comic books experience in the 70s, 80s, 90s, is a very different experience than consuming comics now. I would say that, and I say this as someone who is the editor at a comic book company, that superhero comics, monthly comics, were a much purer, much more close to the metal experience, because there was an immediacy to it. And there was a kind of primacy to it, in that you're tapping into what it feels like, especially with, like, for instance, like X-Men or Teen Titans, what it feels like to not fit in, and to be able to find your own tribe. I think that's why, and I don't think I know that's why a lot of friends of mine who were gay growing up in the 80s, like, really attached onto the X-Men, because it was, for them, it was this model of, like, I'm not like everyone else, or the everyone else that the world shows me. And as a result, you can either be alone or you can find your own family. And the idea of found family is a very strong thing. But to me, the stories that were interesting in the X-Men were like the one-off issues where they had a down day and they were playing baseball and having a picnic, and I should have twigged into that, in a more conscious level earlier, rather than spending years and years of my life doing science fiction and genre entertainment, and then finally coming to the conclusion of like, oh, I should just tell stories about people. So.
Well, and television back then, especially, as you were saying, what was appearing on the TV screen was certainly not real life. The Leave It to Beavers, that was not real life. The Cosbys, real life compared to what that was. Talk about a severe difference.
Well, it's also interesting because, like, if you look at television, especially sitcoms in the 70s, you had shows like Chico and the Man. You had shows like Good Times. You had shows like Sanford and Son, which were showing what life was like in a comedic sense.
And Good Times was very gritty. It was a very powerful show.
Right. So I mean, you have examples of people who are not white and middle class, living life in an urban environment. And their life is just as valid and valuable and all of these things. And to me, that that's an incredibly powerful thing. And by the 80s, by the Reagan years, that stuff's gone. Like we're the only black family you'll see on TV is the Cosby Show, which is for all intents and purposes functioning as you have two doctors who so it's success on a white matrix, on a white experience, rather than okay, what is your community experience? It's and not saying that obviously.
No, I know.
But I'm saying that the spectrum of experience all of a sudden becomes this very narrow. Like, okay, this is how white middle class will accept this, and that's, to me, that's a real fucking tragedy that we've never really pushed back from. I mean, we're starting to see more. We're starting to see more diversity in terms of viewpoints, in terms of narratives, in terms of storytelling styles. But we're still, in a lot of ways, like, the irony is we're diversifying in these ways because of all of these very niche targets as far as venues. With all the streaming services, you have the ability to micro target an audience. But something like Sanford and Son, something like Chico and the Man, something like Welcome Back, Kotter, was mainstream. Every single kid that you went to school with saw that and could quote lines from that and knew that. And there's a power to that we're not going to have, because we don't have that kind of narrow channel thing. So
yeah, the Cosby Show was interesting because it did show. I think it's important to see yourself on television. So for people that had the experience of seeing struggling black families and now they see this super successful black family, that's an important message. But also, I think it's important to show the other, because not only is it important to people of color to see, oh, this family struggles like my family struggles, it's important for a white family to see a show like Good Times and know, oh, they struggle just like we do, to actually break down those walls that separate us, because we are not only seeing the difference, but mostly we're seeing the sameness, that we can wrap our head around the emotional intelligence of it all.
Yeah. And for me, film and TV, growing up in this little rural town of 7,000 people, which was as white as you can get. We had one Chinese family that ran the one Chinese restaurant in town. That was the only non-white family within the city limits. And so those things, those television shows and foreign films were really powerful insights and viewpoints to me in a pre-internet age of like there's a bigger world out there, and it was absolutely the thing that lit the fire under my ass to like, okay, the second the day after I graduated high school, I was in my car driving to Los Angeles. And because that was the world I wanted to be part of. I wanted a world that was bigger and richer and more interesting and that had a diversity of thought and influence and experience and all of those things. Like that to me seemed just intoxicating and really attractive, as opposed to like, everyone knows not only you, but your parents, your grandparents, your entire family lineage. Everyone knows your business, and
Before we put you in the car and go to LA, you also mentioned that. Now, I was confused by the wording of it. Was it a scoutmaster who was a serial killer, or was it the assistant to the? You were an assistant to a scoutmaster who was. I got confused on the.
No, my assistant scoutmaster was a serial killer. Yeah. So, and he also was involved with the Civic Theater, where I was involved, because again, small town. So, yeah, the the story, like the meeting that happened for the last, I don't know, 5-6 years with studio execs and producers was, and we'd be talking about life and stuff, and I would mention, oh yeah, my assistant scoutmaster was a serial killer, and that would be followed with like, well, where's that fucking script? And and the problem was that I didn't know what the angle was for me personally on it, because he's still alive. He was never charged. He lives in North Carolina as a retired postal delivery person. The problem is that because we're talking on the Washington-Idaho border, there are 5 towns, 3 states, and 4 counties, all within 40 miles of each other.
That's a great place for a serial killer to live.
It's a perfect killing field. It really is. Because here's the thing also, there's mountains, there's forests, there's rivers, there's lakes. There's lots of places to get rid of bodies. And
Pacific Northwest period is great for a serial killer.
And in a pre-FBI centralized database era, it's really, really easy to get lost in the arguments over who has jurisdiction over things.
Yeah.
So a lot of evidence got lost or got mishandled. There was a lot of jurisdictional pissy matches that occurred. And so he was never charged. The evidence that exists combined with some other experiential stuff makes both the sheriff's department in the area and a number of us locally 100% sure that
that's the guy. Yeah. Was it children or adults that he killed?
Adults.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Well, no. The people that were killed were women, with one exception who we believe was a happenstance situation. All of them with a variant name of Chris, Christina, Kristen, all blondish, all, early 20s. So, the first notable killing, the first body was discovered on the 4th of July on 1980. And I had dropped out of Boy Scouts. I got kicked out of Boy Scouts. Let's be clear. And I went to get involved with the Lewiston Civic Theater, and he was one of the people who helped build sets and did janitorial work around the theater and that. And 3 of the people who got killed disappeared from the Civic Theater, 2 women and a man. And they never found Stephen Pearsall, who was the man who disappeared, but they found the bodies of the 2 women a year and a half after they disappeared in a ravine off of one of the highways in the surrounding area. So, yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing was he was never caught. So then, what's the story there? This isn't a whodunit. This isn't there's no happy end here.
Why do you think it's him?
Well, like, who else makes prop swords for the Pirates of Penzance that are made out of airplane grade steel that are razor sharp, and that he demonstrates this by throwing melons into the air and slicing them in half.
What was the manner of death for the women?
Dismemberment and.
Oh yeah, fun times. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, so the whole question is like, where does this but where's the through line? What's the story? And the thing that hit me a couple years back after my dad died was that it's not about the murders. It's about how in rural America, predominantly white rural America, how there's a systemic attitude of toxic masculinity and a degree of acceptable violence that's allowed. It's expected you get in fights. It's expected that you, if your woman acts up, you push her around, you keep her in line. This kind of fucking bullshit. And in that kind of environment, there's a really, really thin line between that, what is acceptable violence and actual murder. The oxymoron of the town and the area is that it's always touted as like, oh, it's this perfectly safe, it's this perfectly wonderful thing, until you look at the fact that when I started doing research in the late 1800s, a third of the population of Lewiston was Chinese, and they had the prime real estate downtown, and mysteriously, all of the Chinese-owned buildings were set afire, and all of the white citizens just sat and watched and didn't try and stop it. And then after it was burned to the ground and people had died, they just moved in and built on top of it, took the space for themselves.
Classic.
Yep. So there's a lot of really horrible things that get pushed under the carpet, as it were. So that became the thread of it. It was the fact that and using the parallels between domestic violence and if you're experiencing terror via domestic violence, via a parent being violently abusive to you, really, how much does it scare you to know the bodies are showing up? It's all part of the same thing.
Were you aware as a kid? Did you have feelings around this person, or were you having to deal with your own stuff with your dad?
Here's the fucked up thing is, like, I didn't know that he was the suspect. None of the kids knew that he was the suspect. But the parents knew. Parents knew.
This is like a Freddy Krueger situation.
The parents not only knew, they didn't tell us, avoid him. They would just say, like, well, don't be alone with him. Like, you're going to the cast party? Well, don't be alone with that guy.
But it sounded like he was acting out some sort of fantastical against someone specific, body type, name type.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's, it is on record that when he was in his 20s, he got arrested for breaking into a funeral parlor with a knife, where the body of a woman was that he had reported to the police that she drowned herself, committed suicide, and he witnessed it. So, there's damage, and then you're just flat out fucked up.
So necrophilia, throw that into the mix.
Yeah, it's on for the whole family. So
I wonder if bodies followed him where he is now.
I don't know. I know that here, North Carolina is
also a lot of woods.
Yes, exactly. And also, as we've seen again and again in serial killing or spree killings, that like these aren't things that go away.
They may sleep for a while, and it's also white women tend to get noticed when they go missing far more than anyone else. So maybe, yeah. How many? What was the count in your town then? Was it the 3, or were there more?
There's
or I guess 4 with the drowning.
Well, there's 6 that they've attributed to in a 7-year span, but there's been dozens that disappear, and that people say, well, she probably met a boy and left.
Classic.
Probably ran off. She always was trouble, kind of thing, or these things. So,
wow. You would think that the FBI would be trying to flesh him out at this, because now the DNA and we've come so far with forensic.
Yeah, but the problem is that all of the DNA related evidence has either been tampered with or contaminated, or there's no clean evidence. That can be said, like, oh, here's a strand of hair that was found, in his vehicle that we can now test. Like, the thing to keep in mind, most, especially at that time, most rural law enforcement is elected into position via the friend system. Like, oh, Jimmy Joe's grandfather was sheriff, he'll make a great deputy sheriff, kind of thing. And so you just end up with this, wow. And what law enforcement training have you had?
And you have created a film based on this story now, or are you working on the script now?
No, the script's done. We took it around the end of last year to studios, and the studios and production companies were very positive about it, and the reaction was also like, this is really great, and also you do need to direct this. But we're not going to fund it because you haven't directed anything live action. All the directing experience I have to date is animation. So my solution to that was to deal with another story, to do a short story script that deals with a lot of the same production problems. So set in a small town, dealing with kids in the cast, using a lot of environmental elements from that specific region, and dealing with a lot of the same themes. So childhood alienation, parental abuse, the emotional conflict between father and son, etc. And ran a Kickstarter to fund it, got the crew all lined up, and then in the 1st of March, the plan was to shoot it starting March 31st for 3 days, and we'd be done. And by the 8th of March, we're like, I think maybe we should consider postponing the shoot, because we were watching the number of cases in Washington just grow exponentially, and I was like, if someone gets sick, and at this point we didn't even really have any clue as to how bad it could get, but I was like, if someone gets sick because of I'm working on a movie of mine. I'm gonna not be able to live with myself. I'm gonna feel horrible about that. So we postponed it. We figured like, oh well, we'll shoot in July. Yeah, and here we are. We still haven't shot. And so last week, I started looking at the script and trying to figure out like how can I rework that script to get the same emotional beats, the same narrative thrust, the same themes, all of these things within the same budget, and have it be COVID safe. Because there's a scene, for instance, in the current script where there's a classroom full of 10-year-old kids. And you cannot safely have a classroom of 10-year-old kids that don't have masks, that are, throwing paper balls at each other and, being generally, the little shits that 10-year-olds are. So yeah, hopefully I've got some ideas for solutions on that, and we'll see if we can make that happen, hopefully at the end of the year, beginning of next year. It's a twofold thing. One is finding a solution that reduces the risk, and also it's keeping an eye on the number of cases regionally, and making sure that they aren't growing, especially since they've started opening schools in Idaho and in Washington right now. So,
yeah, it did put quite the wrench into things, didn't it?
It certainly did. Like I had wonderful plans for 2020. And then 2020 just cackled.
Yes, so. That's right. It stared back. Let's get you in the car heading to LA. So you get to LA, and I mean your bio is wacky.
I've had an interesting life. Well,
you ended up on Tori Amos's couch, which is crazy.
So I drove to LA, went to art school for a year. And while I was at art school, I hooked up with this girl that was in the dorms. We had this little month-long whatever thing. And I knew no one in LA. I had come down and worked I had done storyboards on a long-form music video thing called Motown's Mustang, the summer after my sophomore year in high school, and looked at art schools in LA and decided that yes, I was going to do this, and was really I did not have a robust support system, so which is both great and terrifying. The great aspect of it is that you're very open to meeting people. You're very open to having experiences because you don't have any sense of like, oh, this could be dangerous or this could be horrible or whatever. You're just like, hey, let's see what's out there. So this girl said, this friend of mine needs help moving. Will you help her? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, she's a really talented musician. I think you'll get along. So I went and helped her move, and Tori at the time was playing piano at the Holiday Inn out at the airport, and we got along like gangbusters, and the girl and I had a falling out shortly after that, but Tori and I remained really great friends since then, and we would chat back and forth about. I was working on during the 86 to 89, 88 period. I was working on a lot of music videos, so I did like storyboards for like Aerosmith and Scorpions, and was working with director Marty Callner, who at the time did, if any good music video was done, Marty was the guy doing it. And he was fantastic to work with. And so when Tori was doing the Why Can't Tori Read album, and she was like, well, what am I gonna do for the music video? And I said, you need to have Marty do it. I'll introduce you. And so Marty did the video for The Big Picture, which is the only single that came out off of that album. And you can actually see me getting my crotch spray painted by Tori, I think at like around the minute 4 mark on it. And then I had moved back to Washington, was trying to figure out like what I was going to do with my life, because art school, I decided that was a waste of money, because my coping strategy for my first year in art school was to be high or drunk most of the time. And I still got all A's and B's. And I thought, like, I'm paying this kind of money, and I literally don't remember anything from these classes. So that seems like a waste of money. So let me figure out what I'm going to do with my life. So I went back to Washington and was going down to LA for like 3 months at a time, 4 months at a time. And there was this show that called The Simpsons that was going to come out based on some stuff that Matt Groening was doing. And they were looking for artists and storyboard artists and things like that. And I was like, oh, I'm going to take a swing at this. So Tori said, well, you can crash on my couch and while you're doing the audition stuff for it. So for that entire summer, she was in the process of finishing up the recording of Little Earthquakes. And I was auditioning for The Simpsons, which I did not get. My roommate from art school ended up becoming the color director for The Simpsons, though. So, and it's a fantastic summer. The album is an iconic album.
It is indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I know it was. It took until 2008 for her and I to actually get to work on a big project together, which is when we did Comic Book Tattoo. So, which was the graphic novel anthology of 51 stories inspired by and based on her songs. So, which ended up winning me the Eisner Award and the Harvey Award. And again, so it's like, yes, okay. So some people would say that's a chaotic life, living on credit cards and on couches. But it's also like you're open to the strangeness and opportunities of the moment.
You have to leap. I mean, that's the thing about being in the artistic realm is show up, just keep showing up. God knows what's going to happen, and there's a lot, it's the roller coaster from hell sometimes, but then you're available for these great moments that will absolutely change your life.
Yeah, and it's not...
and saying yes. If you hadn't said yes to helping someone move...
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that, there is a tendency within the entertainment community for relationships to be transactional, for it to be very like, oh, I'll help you if you can help me on this. And I understand that because part of that's business, but to me, the thing that is always, I think from a karmic standpoint, or just being a good human being or whatever, it's like, it's a much better thing just to be there for people, to have relationships based on like, do you like this person? Do you like this person's ideas? Do you like their outlook on life? Do you like their energy, or however you want to look at it? Do you connect with them?
Right. And success is a crapshoot, and being a good human being isn't. Be a good human being. And
right.
And either it depends on what your idea of success is as well. Is success having, the Smaug gold, or is it looking yourself in the mirror and liking what you see?
Yeah, and I mean I think that's a huge. I think that's one of the biggest lessons that again, academically these things. Academically like, oh, there's more important things than money, right? But until like growing up dirt fucking poor, like powdered milk and government cheese and government egg noodles poor, getting to work at Disney it was for me the holy grail, because it's like, oh my God, like I never have to explain to anyone what it means when I say that I'm an art director at Disney. Like that's self-explanatory, and they pay me, they're paying me $85,000 a year, which in 1997 money is huge money. And I get quarterly bonuses that are 5 figures. So it's like, this is fantastic. And yet I developed a 3 martini drinking habit for lunches in order to not kill my boss. I gained 80 pounds. I missed my eldest daughter's first year of life pretty much because I was working 16-hour days, 6 days a week. And it was absolutely an utterly miserable experience. I love the people that I worked with, but the working experience itself, it was one of those things where it's a concrete, now you can understand this on a cellular basis, that money is not worth misery. And it just isn't. I think that the thing for me again, going back to like, there was a pretty significant change over the last 5 years of coming to the realization of like, okay, let's assume that you're going to die tomorrow, or, give yourself a little runway. Let's assume you're going to die in a month, right? So what regrets do you have? And the regret is never, boy, I wish I got to walk the red carpet at, whatever. Because for me, the thing that lasts is the human impact, that you leave behind. And whether it's through interpersonal relationships or whether it's through a story that impacts someone long after you're gone, those are the things that, for me personally, that I came to the conclusion that it's like, I have to feel, and especially in the conclusions of the 2016 election, it was like, I'm not a politician. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the ability to not swear at people. I will say that I used to say that I could never do politics because of my chemical past and because of my profanity and all these things.
All bets are off now.
Yeah. So who knows? But the things that I can do is maybe tell stories that make people feel a little less alone or feel seen. It's a much harder road to hoe. It would be a much easier thing if I just stayed on the path that I was on, writing adaptations of science fiction books for studios. It pays better. I have all the connections already for that. So it's, those are easy phone calls to make. But I just felt like that I was contributing negative things to the overall psyche of the world. And that's not a judgment against anyone doing any kind of genre work. I am totally fucking looking forward to the new version of Dune. I fucking love Dune.
Great book. I love that book.
It looks so good. But for me personally, it's like, I'm like, no, I'm more interested in like the films, like White Material or Y Tu Mama También, where, you're dealing with the friction of the individual or of couples or relationships trying to navigate through the weirdness of life.
Did you like Moonlight?
I loved Moonlight.
Great film.
I got very drunk with Barry Jenkins and sang karaoke with him 2 years before Moonlight came out at a WGA conference, and didn't realize it until he won the Oscar. And I'm like looking at the picture, I'm going, wait, and then I like look at the pictures from the conference, I'm going, oh my God, I've gotten drunk and done karaoke with that guy. So I thought Moonlight was fantastic. I think honestly, I think Barry's one of the best filmmakers that's currently working now in the new stuff. And it's hard because, like, to me, those are I'm a pretentious Criterion loving asshole that wants grander cinema. I think that, but I think the stuff that Barry's doing, I think the stuff that Chloe Zhao's doing with like songs my brother taught me are old school cinema, like in this way that it's this rich and powerful thing that could only be done in film. It's not you're taking advantage of the specificity of the medium to tell a story that impacts on a very personal and very individual and very human level. And I think that the thing that's fantastic about films like Moonlight, um, see it also in films like Hell or High Water.
Tangerine, The Florida Project, all of those films.
I thought Tangerine was fantastic.
Oh, so good.
The thing with films like that is it's the specificity of the narration, of the narrative, of the point of view, of the experience that makes it universal for the audience. Because there's the ability to place yourself into that moment and to feel what they're feeling, because there is this very real, very realized point of view to it. So that's what I'm trying to do with all of these features. With serial killers aside, like I'm not doing any serial killers now. I've moved on to 1978 and the Oregon coast, and so yeah.
Do you have a working title for the serial killer movies that when it comes out, people will...
The serial killer feature is called And Then. Because again, because I'm that pretentious Criterion Collection loving guy, it's the thing that nothing ends. There's not a clean end to any of this. That there's the trauma we suffer. There's ideally the lessons we learn from it. And there is hopefully a better path forward, but the path, the path doesn't end. We just hand off the baton to the next generation. And hopefully we do that with as little friction and as little pain as possible. But, as a parent, it's impossible to do that, because part of the experience of being human is to have friction and to have pain and to learn from it. And you're going to do things wrong because you're human. And hopefully you don't do things too wrong. And the good way outweighs the bad in terms of what you hand on to the next generation, your kids or your nieces or nephews or friends' kids that you babysit or whatever.
How old are your children?
I have 4 daughters. They are 22 through 19. So
have you had the conversations with them about, I am my own human, you're your own human, that aspect of life?
I think it's getting to that point. For right or wrong, I kind of take the philosophy of it that to allow them the space to make up their own minds about things, to come to their own conclusions about things, and try and be there to listen, to talk, to all these things. And it's difficult, especially in COVID times, because there's distance. One of my daughters my eldest is up in Washington, and my younger 3 are in San Diego, and I'm in Los Angeles. So there's the physical different distance of that, but it's, I don't know. It's the thing of trying to allow the space that they can manifest their own ideas and not feel like I'm didactically preaching to them that like, well, this is what life is about, and this is what it is. Because God knows I can have that tendency to be self-righteous and arrogant about all these things. So, yeah, it is a difficult thing, to know like when to go forward and when to pull back, when to allow space, and when to be present. And again, these are the things that I did not have a father that was present. I was very blessed that my mom is an amazing human being. She was an elementary school teacher for 35 years. She's incredibly creative, incredibly kind, incredibly giving. And I know that I would pretty much be not where I am in life if I hadn't had her example. But it's still, it's one of those things of like there's no real user's manual on any of this stuff. So, and there's not a lot of examples, of like, here's how you can be a good parent. So like whenever I would see friends of mine before I was a parent, that would have kids and they seemed to get it right, I was like, oh, that's what I want to try and do. And then you proceed to not do the thing.
We're all doing the best we can. I don't have children, but I do appreciate how difficult it must be to raise kids. Especially, I mean, who knows? Everything is comparative, but I think especially these days. But raising kids in the 50s was probably interesting too. So, I don't know.
Well, it's the thing of like, so I belong to this Facebook group, which is you're probably from Lewiston and Clarkston thing, which is a regional thing that is largely built up just on memories, and so you have people posting images from the 1800s through the 80s and all that, and people talking about their different experiences and what they remember, and bonfires and all this stuff. And the thing that is like really, really clear to me with watching, because my mom grew up in that same town, in that same area. She grew up in Lewiston, went to Lewiston High School, and I went to Clarkston and was senior class president. So if there's ever evidence that being senior class president means absolutely fucking nothing and has no merit or value to it, this would be one of those perfect examples. That there's the things that you think are unique to your generation, for the most part, as a human experience, are not. The ideas of sex, of not being able to communicate with your parents, of wanting the desires of youth, whether it's wanting a car, whether it's wanting independence, whether it's wanting people to like you, whether it's wanting people to see you for who you really are, all these things. I think the big difference, I'm going to sound really, really old and crotchety here, but I think about this shit a lot because as a writer, you break these things down, in trying to bring characters to life. But the thing for me that's the difference is that as a weird kid growing up in the 80s, and who knew other weird people, in weird in quotes, i.e. not homogeneous, typical kind of go with the flow kind of people in small town America, from previous generations. You had to really work and put in effort to define who you were. You had to do the research. You had to make effort to find your tribe. You had to do road trips when you heard about a new wave dance night that was at one of the local college towns 40 miles away. and you had to not only make the drive up there without having a car and not having public transportation, but you actually had to figure out how you were going to sneak in underage into this thing just so you could hear music that was your kind of thing. Or that, and also like the discovery of music, the discovery of new wave and punk and goth, industrial, all these things. It's like, what's your gateway for that? And then how do you, branch out from that? The idea of information being passed through zines, which are passed person to person to person. This is how you build your tribe. This is how you build your identity. This is how because also here's the thing. Music, today, and I know this is a gross generalization, there are exceptions to the rule, caveats aside, music today sucks, and part of that is because of the effort that we had to make in order to find your tribe, to find your identity, to define yourself. It also went to the same thing of defining what you had to say. So as a writer, if you had something to say, if you wanted people to pay attention to what you had to say, you had to do the woodshedding with the writing to make sure that it was fantastic, that it was as bulletproof as possible.
And you could see the arc of someone becoming also by listening to their body of work.
Exactly. And music, it's like, you would woodshed, you would play bar gigs, you would play every crappy little, backyard party in that in order to write your own music, in order to figure out what you had to say, in order to figure out what got over on the audience, what conveyed in them the reaction that you wanted. And those things, those things took time and took refinement to figure out how you could weaponize what you had to say. And that, if effective, then got you attention. People would actually pay attention to what you were doing and what you had to say. And now the problem is with social media, we can bleed off all these things. Like if you have this impulse of rage at something that Donnie Shitfingers is doing in the White House, you can simply just bleed it off on Twitter or on Instagram or on Facebook. It doesn't build up and coalesce from a lump of coal into a hard diamond of anger that then becomes the core of a song, or that becomes the core of an essay, or that becomes the core of any of these things. And I don't think it's coincidental that we don't see those kinds of things. You don't see
words as protest.
Right. You don't see manifestos. You don't see people putting out declarative stances that then organize and unify people into a movement. We have the ability, ironically, to connect with people on a much faster basis and to organize protests, marches, and all this. But a perfect example is like the defund the police, thing. It's like that becomes a viral hashtag event without any, with the majority of people, if you say to the common person on the street, what do you know of defund the police? They're not going to be able to tell you what the stance of that is. Because again, you go into the difference of activism in the 60s or in the 70s or in the 80s, and you look at the statements that accompanied the declaration of a movement, because it's like these things have been workshopped, they have been talked about, they have been refined to like this is the problem, this is what we demand, this is how we measure success.
Right, and you had the Rage Against the Machines, or NWA, or the Cranberries, or in the beginning U2, or Sex Pistols, any of these bands that were working out, or the Clash. The Clash is a great example.
Yeah, exactly. And it becomes so you end up with things that are there's no backbone to it. This pop expressionism kind of thing. And the thing that bothers me is that I just see in a lot of current art, in quotes, like a lot of sameness, a lot of drawing from the same influences. Whereas you look at, people, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they're having to figure out like, oh, I like this. What's my version of that? Mm. I love this, I love this obscure Austrian artist. What's my take on what she did?
There's such a desire today also to have someone hit a like button in the grander scheme of things. So you want to be liked. And so the homogeny seems like the easiest path to being liked.
Well, yeah, because it's gamified. Like the one of the, I got out of, did software and video game development for 17 years as a creative director. And one of the things that really pushed me to the point of like, okay, I can't do this anymore, was the intent as an industry to gamify all software experiences. So to put that in context, the point of gamification is a reward system that's addicting. It is to trigger that primal level of response that the joke's always made of, like, rats in the cage with the lever, getting the treats, and that's it boiled down, is to figure out what triggers those responses and what triggers those responses in a low effort way that can then level up. So leveling up on this is followers. What is the initial trigger is likes. What is the mastery of it is, in the case of Twitter, it's retweets. And there's all these levels of, and I say this as someone who very clearly benefits from social media. Like the last 8 jobs that I've gotten have been directly because of Facebook and Twitter. It is a very powerful tool, but it is also a very powerful tool that gets abused and misused a lot. And I think that it has, ironically, in a world that sits there and talks about, the value of different viewpoints, of different methods of expression, of all these things, that it's become a very reductive, simplistic kind of conversation. That it's like, if I disagree with what you're saying, you are canceled. If I don't agree with you, it is a moral judgment that you are a bad person, rather than actually opening up a discussion of like, okay, I disagree with you. Here's how I feel about this. Why are you? And these are discussions that we would have in person. If you're a kind person and not an arrogant asshole. But there are, for instance, friends of mine who are conservative, who I can, or lean conservative, we'll say, who I can have discussions on politics about, because it's done with mutual respect. And there's also the runway of us having shared experience, that I know who they are as a human being. They know who I am as a human being. They know that I am coming from a position of good faith as they are. I'm not trying to do a gotcha. I'm not trying to win, because that's also the thing.
Oh yeah, the win. Yeah,
the championship level thing.
Yeah,
it's the last word. That's the ultimate burn, because then I've won. And look, I got 500 followers from that sick burn. That's how we've completely fucking destroyed ourselves.
It's interesting because you, being a person that has been in the video game world, and what was that movie that was within a video game? It was from a really popular book. They put every product placement in the world in it.
Ready Player One.
That's it, Ready Player One. That it becomes very meta, our existence. Yeah. I know so many people that spend hours upon hours in video games, and there is a desensitization that happens. There is the, or for that matter, a removal of one from this world as they go play around in the farming worlds and the Second Lives and all that. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's the change of value. It's the where does accomplishment, where do my efforts reach accomplishment that gives me a sense of value?
Right, and your brain doesn't know. Your brain can't tell the difference of the feeling with killing somebody on a screen versus going out and killing someone. To the brain, it feels very much the same.
Well, and here's the thing too, is that like, so when I was in video game development, we would get very heated and angry about people like Joe Lieberman, saying that video games were destroying the youth and
Sure.
and all.
Or the Tipper Gores of music.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it's like, because it's a restriction. You're trying to restrict creativity. And I still believe that there are films that I never want to watch. There are books I have no desire to read, but I will 100% defend.
Of course.
Right to do those things, because if nothing else, it's an interesting insight into how other people look at things.
Right. I just think consumerism should be on a level of consciousness, not a level of unconsciousness.
Right. And again, it's the idea that with media becoming okay, to rewind a bit, the discussion is like, well, your parents didn't, your parents being my generation, didn't, become serial killers or mass shooters because they saw the Terminator or because they saw Alien. And it's like, yeah, but here's the thing, like Watchmen, like Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, the wrong lessons for entertainment were learned from those films. The core elements of humanity, of character interaction, of the price that's paid, of the cost of loss, all of those things that were inherent in this, and that all of the explosions, all of the pithy sayings were for the frosting over the core of what that was. We're now served up frosting. Like I look at, the Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame is a perfect example. It's just shtick after shtick after shtick after shtick, and it's very successfully designed, again, to hit that primal lizard brain switch to like, oh yeah, victory, 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 victory. And at a certain point, we wonder why our brains aren't healthy, why we're not able to slow down and actually savor, a quiet moment. There are, we go back to Moonlight and what Barry Jenkins doing, like the entire thing, and he did this a lot with Beale Street as well, is that like there's so much information conveyed on some of those slow shots that are held, in the micro expressions of the actor, because that's a very human thing. We peel back what someone's actually feeling, what their perception is of you, what their perception is of the situation. In those moments, in those micro expressions, that they can say, no, I'm fine. No, I'm okay. I'm not bothered at all. And by the way that their eyes crinkle, or by the way that they pull their bottom lip in, all these things, that's right. Not the case. So, yeah. So kids these days, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I know. Rantz, how can people find you?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I do have a domain, but it's not active. So, Mystery Creative, which, let's get this right, because I had to be clever.
Yeah, and you're very active on Twitter.
I'm trying to not be. How's that?
I enjoy it.
On Instagram, I'm RantzH. On Twitter, I am Mystery Creative, which is Mystery CR8TVE.
That is creative.
Well, it was because someone else actually had the full name Mystery Creative, and I was carpetbagging into the Mystery Hollywood experience with that account 5 years ago.
I'm going to put links for everything, all of your work and everything we've talked about will all go on the links page on heyhumanpodcast.com as well, so it's easy for people to get to you and to get to your work. And thank you for this incredible conversation.
Well, I hope that we didn't bore the audience out too much, but...
I can't imagine that would be the case. We talked about serial killers, for God's sakes.
It's true. This is true. What's wrong with this generation and serial killers? We've covered all of the basics.
That's right. Rantz, thank you for being on Hey Human. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening, everybody. And be well. Take care of each other. Bye.
Bye.
Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, everybody. Bye.